live for those in the public that might be interested in seeing what we get up to?
Chairman, we are now live.
Thank you very much, and good evening. Welcome to the meeting. I'm Councillor Jeff Cant, the chairman of the committee. Before we start, I'd like to explain for the benefit of members of the public who may be watching that today's meeting is being held both over Zoom and with councillors physically present. In addition to myself, the other committee members are, I don't think Jeff Beck's actually here, but Jeremy Cotton, Tony Linden, Jeff Mays, and B. Aloko. We also have parish council representatives on the committee who are not in attendance. Oh, and you. Sorry, and Councillor Moore, forgive me. I'm reading from a prepared script, as you can probably imagine, and it wasn't completed. Our parish council representatives on the committee are Bill Graham from Shawcombe, Donington. Parish councillors are permitted to speak at the meeting, but not permitted to vote on any of the items on the agenda. I don't think Joseph's here tonight, is he? Visibly. Sarah Clark and Julie Gillespie are the officers who will be advising the meeting. And so Sadie Owen is the clerk of the meeting with Ben Ryan as our Zoom host. Please can I ask everyone present, I'm sure you're very familiar with this routine now, to make sure you have the microphone placed in front of you as much as possible and that you speak directly into it once you've pressed the button that illuminates the red light, which tells you now's the time to speak. In the event of an evacuation alarm, I'm sure the officers will guide us from the building, but we just need to remind you to proceed by the safe emergency exit into the car park of the Dolphin Pub where we'd assemble. Thank you. Okay, apologies for absence. Clark, do we have apologies?
Yeah, we've got apologies from councillors Rick Jones, David Marsh and David Southgate.
Thank you very much. Item 2, if members have had a chance to scan the minutes, have we got any observations of the minutes, or can we ask for someone to propose them?
Yes, Chairman, I'd like to propose approval of the minutes, please.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Linden. Someone to second that? Councillor Loco, thank you. Okay, in favour? Thank you, I think that's unanimous, thank you. Any declarations of interest on any of the items we've got on the list? Okay, page 9 to 10 now of the agenda items. It's the forward plan. Any amendments that anyone can see, any changes, any omissions they can see from the forward plan they'd like addressed?
Yes, Chair, I'd like to add one. I think it needs to include the internal audit update report for Q3.
Okay.
And just to say that I'm very pleased to see that the Constitution Review features on the forward plan. Thank you for that.
Yes, thank you very much for that, Councillor Moore. You were the one who suggested that. I'm glad to see that's now in. Anything else on the forward plan? Or do we take it as read with that amendment and that acknowledgement? Okay, we now have an internal audit report update with Julie Gillespie. Julie.
Chair, before I go on to that, I just wanted to mention about the minutes in the last meeting. When I covered my update report then, I was asked by 2 councillors to give an update to this committee about the follow-up for the deprivation of liberty safeguards audit follow-up. I don't know if you can recall that sort of, I was saying unsatisfactory progress at the time, but there was reasons for this. I've gone back to the service director and the actual situation is still the same. They're still waiting for a change in legislation and the implementation of the care director system upgrade. So they can't make any progress until those happen. So it's a status quo, really.
Okay. Thank you for that.
So if I go on to my paper, so the report really is just to give an update to committee on the outcome of audit work completed during Q1 of 22-23. And as mentioned in 1.3, I'm basically saying that and 1.2, that putting this report together to highlight if there's any concerns that have been raised during the period. And my conclusion from the work is that there's no issues that I needed to raise to committee. And the actual outcomes of the work are set out in Appendix A, which is the completed work, and Appendix B is work in progress. So it's a positive report. There's no issues to identify, so it's whether members have got any queries.
Do I see any hands raised? Anyone wants to query that report? Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Moore.
Yeah, I'm just interested, thank you for the report. I'm just interested in para 5.4 and the COVID fraud follow-up. I wondered how the figures that you've got there might compare with sort of equivalent councils. It's difficult, you know. Some of those numbers are a bit woo.
Yes, they are, aren't they? Yes.
But I mean, is that typical?
I wouldn't like to. I don't know, to be honest. We were asked by the government department, the buys department, to provide this information because all the grant funding came from them. How we compare, I really don't know, but I do think they look very low. From the point of view of the 104,000 of paid in error or not recovered, as a percentage of the 40 million, that is very low. But sorry, I haven't got any comparatives to be able to give you any information on that.
And if that's the bit where there's an error detected, and you know, is there any sort of follow-up process on errors or fraud detected? I mean, when that's been done, or does that go out with the council to follow that up? How does anything?
We've done as much as we can do. In most cases, it was where the companies were going into liquidation or they were paid in error, and we cannot recover the funds. Right. So we've done as much as we can do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, Councillor Linden.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so what you just said, Julie, is that out of the £786,000 total value fraud or error, and also where fraud and error was detected of over £500,000, 555,000. So I was looking at this last night. So there's £104,000 that haven't been recovered. So you're saying that is due to insolvency rather than...
Oh, it's a mixture of things. It's errors or insolvency. And we've tried to recoup where we can, and that's the value that's outstanding. Okay, so it's a very good amount compared to what's happening nationally, really. Well, it's a good amount when you compare. We paid out £40 million. Yes. I think that was what the figures are trying to say. But I can't compare with what other councils have done. But I do know, and I think I've mentioned to committee before, that both my team and the revenues team have had a lot of processes in place to do pre-checks and post-checks on the accuracy of all these grants before they went out the door. Which is Chairman, this is a very good result. I mean, compared to obviously the difficulty at the time and people really worried about what's happening during COVID. And
the relatively high proportion of bounce back loans that we know are probably fraudulent is much higher than this proportion, I think.
Yes, yeah. So, you know, I'd like to say that your team and the other team have done very good. And if we could record that as a committee, saying this is well worth doing and done a good job. Thank you. If you can just send it back to your team.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for having that recorded. And well done, Julie. And before we move on to the update on the Constitution, the book we've got as supplemental papers, something I want to just throw into the mix. I've forewarned Julie about this. Last week, we had a forum for auditors in a number of councils across the south, and Julie was present at that. Very, very productive, very fruitful. And Julie was there, and I chaired that. And one of the interesting things that came out, which I've been quite interested in for some time, is that a number of the members mentioned the fact that some councils had quite a sophisticated programme of drawing to the attention of the more vulnerable groups with whom their council deal, the risks and ways of avoiding the big rise in fraud that's now being committed on those sort of very vulnerable groups, particularly the elderly, I guess, or the disabled. And I know Julie's aware that there is some activity already within the council, but what I suggest we ask her to do is have a look at that, see if there's more we as a council we could do, if that's possible, and come back to us at our next meeting with some sort of update as to whether there are things that we might take forward as a council to help those groups, or whether we're already doing plenty, or maybe other agencies are doing plenty. So it's a matter of assessment. I think it's important we get on top of that. Do we have some sort of feel about that? Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, we've got a history of not only working with other departments, so, you know, Sean Murphy's area in terms of public protection with us in Bracknell Forest, but also we do work with other agencies like the police, obviously our own internal things like social services, but and also the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service we work with, the ambulance service, other partners, especially in the health service, for instance, with our new Bob. So we've done Berkshire West, and now we've got Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire joining us. So we do a lot of collaborative working to do a lot of prevention, as well as with central government, so, and the police, obviously. So we're doing a hell of a lot. And we do meetings on a regular basis, obviously not big on the executive, none of us here, you know, but there is a lot of working on that area, and we're very positive on that, Jim.
Yeah, I'm sure there's lots of work being undertaken, as Julie said, but I think it would be nice for us to get an update as to just assure ourselves
Totally agree, Jim,
that those things are all linked together and they're all being dealt with adequately. Okay, thanks, Julie. So now we have the thing that's probably taken as long as the gestation of an elephant to produce. An item on the ongoing evolution development of the Constitution, which I know has been very complicated, very hotly debated, quite rightly, because once this is set, this will be unchanged, I would guess, for a number of years. So we're being invited to look at this, and perhaps Sarah, you could introduce it for us.
Yes, indeed. And I'm no expert in the gestational period for elephants, but I would suggest it exceeds this, or this exceeds that. Yeah, this was a project that the council, and I think it was in this committee back in 2019 that it was agreed that we would do a full scale review of the Constitution, and without doubt, the impacts of COVID, this was one of the kind of significant things that got in effect shelved for a period because people were dealing with other priorities. I think from the outset, and I think what's important, this wasn't because we had a constitution that didn't work. I think we had a very solid set of rules that we were operating by. They had stood us in good stead in terms of effective decision making, but I think the challenge was that people struggled to understand where to find those rules. So a large part of this has been about actually developing a document that can be easily navigated by everyone, and that's kind of officers working in the council, members of the council, and members of the public who we want to engage with us and who are interested in what the council is doing. So I think what we have developed in effect is, and also I think one of the challenges with our constitution was that there was lots of repetition in there. So we had council rules, we had executive rules, we had rules for each of the committees, and they would be updated, but they would be updated in parts. And what that meant was that it became disjointed over time. So this is really to reset that and to try and have a single coherent set of rules. So I think I would probably start here, and the job isn't yet done. So there may be a few more baby elephants on the way, but to sort of a couple of thank yous. So I think that the Constitution Review task group, which has consisted of councillors Jeff Beck, Graham Bridgman, who has chaired this, Jeff Brooks, James Cole, Andy Marsh and Andy Moore, and Howard Wollaston, and also Councillor Jeff Mays, who was a former member of the task group. And I think that the task group have really played a significant part in the work of this project to review the Constitution. So I thank you to them. Thank you also to the officers in Democratic Services and the legal team who've also been working on the drafting of the rules. And I think thank you to the members who came to, we held 2 workshops to in effect road test these rules, to kind of say to members what would happen in this scenario. So thanks also to the members who attended those workshops. So I'm not going to take members through these line by line. They have been discussed on many occasions, as we've said, I think, but it's worth me highlighting the structure in the supplementary pack at page 1, in effect, is an outline of the parts. And so I think how it is intended that these parts will work is that we will have a core set of meeting rules, and they will set out the kind of core fundamental operating procedures for all council meetings. That's supplemented by a meetings rules table. It's very hard to read in this pack. I think this will be available digitally, which will make it far easier to navigate. But the meetings rules table will be a really helpful quick reference guide. So can I submit a petition to X body? I'll look on there and it will tell you what's the order of business. Can I do this in this meeting? So I think that's a really helpful addition to the Constitution. And then supplementing the meeting rules, we've got a questions appendix and a petitions appendix. So again, that's something that previously had slightly different versions in different parts. So it's now, or they sit now as an appendix to the meeting rules. We've then got a specific part for council rules, so council being the most significant decision-making body, so they have their own set of rules, and the executive again with its own set of rules, and we have in there the executive appendix, which relates to individual decisions. So that was previously in part 13, so you had part 5 for the executive rules procedure, but then individual decisions, which relates to individual executive decisions, were in part 13. So again, we've brought those together. And then we then have council bodies rules. So again, that you've got an introduction there, or an overarching part, which is the council bodies. And then we have a series of appendices to that, which has brings in to and hopefully into one place the rules relating to the various bodies. So if I use planning as an example, planning previously had, if I was advising a planning committee, I'd have to have part 7 of the Constitution open, potentially part 3 of the Constitution open, which is the scheme of delegation, talks about referencing up. You'd also have to have part 13 of the Constitution open, where you've got the planning. We had the planning code of conduct in addition to the members code of conduct. So that really consolidates everything. If I'm in a planning committee, I need to be looking in my planning rules, the planning appendix, and obviously the meeting rules will also be relevant. So I think that's an overview of how this will work. It will be that the intention is to have all of this online, and it will all be hyperlinked. So again, we will be developing a glossary, which will have then the common rules or the common definitions, which we need to have applied consistently. And I think it's important to note that what we're proposing is that we will recommend these to council so that they will be adopted or come into effect from January 2023. And the reason for that is, as I said, there is more work to do. And so what I want to ensure is that we have the budget and policy framework, the financial rules and the contract rules of procedure in particular reviewed by the task group. And then so we have the opportunity to bring them to council in December, so that actually there is no conflict between what we've done here and what's in those sort of significant parts of the Constitution. So they will link up in the meantime as well. Once these have been approved by council, then the digital services team will start to kind of format these so that they are all online and they get ahead of that work over the coming months. So I think with that, I think that these are recommended, that Governance and Ethics Committee recommend these to Council for approval. I must point out that this has been a work in progress. We've got various parts that have been updated. Members of the task group will have seen Graham Bridgman, who's currently on leave and has been emailing. We were both emailing over the long weekend, but Graham has continued to email from his holidays, and there are several parts that have been updated. So there may be slight variations, but the substance of what goes to Council is what is here. I should also point out that within the recommendations, we will be asking Council to delegate to myself in consultation with the chairman of the task group the power to make minor additional corrections to the parts of the Constitution to ensure consistency in terminology and presentation. So again, this is not about making any substantive changes, but where we've got the kind of committee chairman referred to the sort of incorrectly, then we'll make those changes so that actually the definitions are consistent throughout.
That's excellent. Thank you. Thank you for your work. Before I ask anyone to step in, can I just say how pleased I was to see 12.3 and 12.4 in this on page 7 around motions, because I'm aware that that sometimes there's a very lengthy list of motions, some of which aren't necessarily directly relevant to the council's core activities, and giving the chair more control over making sure that motions don't go on so long they dislodge key council business or reduce the amount of time we should be spending on key council business. I think it's a very attractive option, and congratulations on that. Councillor Cottam. Oh, sorry, Councillor Linden.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I've got quite a number of questions I was going to ask about a variety of items in particular. I don't know whether Councillor Cottam wants to do something more briefly so I could give way to him.
Thank you, Councillor Linden. Mine's a simple question about...
Your mic's not on.
Thank you. Basically, item 2H, and it's got question marks after the in consultation with the 3 group leaders. It's page 24. Oh
no, so I think you've got an earlier pack. So actually the report that reissued. So at proposal H, it states now, delegates the monitoring officer in consultation with the chairman of the Constitution Review Task Group the power to make minor additional corrections to the parts of the Constitution to ensure consistency in terminology and presentation. So I think it was trying to kind of agree a mechanism by which we can make those minor typographical. If there was anything substantive, of course, it could come back to council in December when we bring forward those other parts. So if there is anything in here that I think I don't have the power under that to change, it will come back to council.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. As you've been courteous enough to stand down for one, is yours fairly short too, Councillor Loco? Because I think Tony's got quite a long list of things for us to consider.
Yes, Chairman. Mine is really just a comment to pick up on what Sarah had said about, you know, the ability to review, because I think that's quite key. Because for me, the content is the content. I mean, I think once that's approved, but because this is a digital transformation, if you like, where data content is being moved, I think it's important that that mechanism is actually put in place to ensure that there's consistency when it's been transferred from format to format. Really, and when I heard that, I thought that was quite good. So it's just a point well made. Yeah,
point well made. Thank you, Councillor Loco. Councillor, do you have the floor?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the first 2 I've already discussed with Sarah Clark. So on page 6, the ending of the meeting, which is 10.8, at 10:45. I've been on for nearly 35 years, and I think at 10:30 cut off, or are we unlikely when we get to that meeting just to accept the recommendations of the of this working party, or would members have the opinion whether they want to carry it on to 10:30 or 10:45?
Well, so I think that change was made at December Council last year. So that there had been a motion by Councillor Lee Dillon, I believe, who had suggested that we remove the guillotine on council meetings. And the task group had discussed that at some length. And actually what was finally agreed is that for meetings of council, that there should still be, that there should be an assumption that you'll finish by 10. That should be the sort of deadline that you're working to, that members can move a motion to continue the meeting till 10:30. But the chairman of council should be given some discretion to go slightly beyond that 10:30 threshold. So I think it is by the exception, but it's within the chairman's discretion. And I think actually that's one of the themes that came out through the task group discussions, is in effect giving the chairman of all meetings actually the ability to conduct business effectively and efficiently. So it's giving that power to the chairman to think, well, you know, I don't want to curtail this discussion at this point. This is a good conversation, and to give them that little bit of flexibility to stretch that. It's not going sort of massively beyond that, but I think it's about giving the chairman some power, and the ability to go to 10:45 is limited to meetings of council and not other meetings.
Yeah, I fully realise it. So so if members decide they want to carry on till 10:30, I suppose that could be discussed on our December meeting.
Yes, I mean that's so. It's always been that members could extend till 10:30. But the further decision for the extra 15 minutes at chairman's discretion, we could decide that we don't want to change it and leave it to 10:30. That's the rule now, Tony. So at council 2021, December 2021, a report on the constitution went to council. It was primarily relating to changes to the budget meeting of council, but within that, members agreed that for meetings of council, that the cut-off time could be extended at the discretion of the chairman.
We actually had a vote, I can't remember it.
No, so that was approved by council in December. So members, of course, can decide what they wish to decide, but the current rule is that meetings of council could go to 10:45.
Okay, thank you. On page 9, we've got this 16.3, members may stand, which is fine when we've got the cameras sorted out. But obviously, I think there are quite a lot of members who, quite frankly, are quite happy just to sit down to speak. So that just gives members the option whether they want to stand or not. I know previously we used to stand, but
I think it says may, so I think may stands. I think it's just about some flexibility.
Flexibility.
I think that's right. Yeah.
I was also thinking, because when we discussed motions, there have been in the recent past public questions which tend to be the same sorts of questions coming up at full council. Was that raised at all, Sarah?
There is, within the existing rules, there are certain restrictions over questions. I think we haven't really sought to go beyond that. So what we didn't want to do, I suppose, was to inhibit kind of public participation and engagement. I think there are rules within the Constitution already that say if a question is substantially the same as one that's previously been asked, then actually well, either I can reject it, or in giving an answer, you can refer them to the answer that's already been given. So I think what we do have, and because again, this is a good example of where the divergence of where the rules are can kind of complicate things. So you've got rules that apply to questions to executive and a separate set of rules that apply to questions to council. So now we'll have a consistent set of rules in the questions appendix. So that will be kind of hopefully very transparent and clear to everyone. But I think that what we don't want is to have the same question asked repeatedly at meetings, because actually that just, it doesn't necessarily serve any purpose.
Okay, I know it's been raised at health scrutiny that we've only got 5 members for instance, as a possibility. But we could do a minor change of council if we decide to increase the membership of that committee, because it is quite low. But I know a certain member of the executive would prefer us to keep to our current 5.
Well, yeah, so I think it is within council's gift. We had a kind of quite a lengthy conversation about that at one of the task group meetings. It was agreed that this was going to go forward as it is with the current membership. But when council appoints to the committees in May, it may choose to revise the number on all of the committees, and it could be looked at then. So it is a matter for council. I think what's quite interesting, you've also got personnel committee with 5 members, and actually I was reading, I don't know whether it's through SIPFA, that they were suggesting that audit committees should have no more than 5 members. So it's not a number that's unheard of, if I can put it in that way, but it's for members to decide how many members they want on the committee.
But also, I just to add to that in reflection, obviously, the amount of external work and scrutiny you have to do, that it just takes up a lot of people. I mean, for instance, overdue scrutiny, our parent committee, you know, we're having difficulties getting task and finish groups, and that in that relativity rather than being on personnel.
Make a very good point. Members are very thinly spread now, aren't they? And
I know.
Extend committees makes it even more onerous than it presently is.
It does. So it's just to really, when we have our new council in May, it's something I think needs to be reflected.
Indeed.
I wasn't too sure when I had a quick look on page 5, 7.1, non-member councils, what that really meant, because what I took it is, for instance, if I attended a meeting of a committee I'm not on, that I have the right to attend that committee. But obviously, if I wanted to speak, I'd need the permission of the chairman to do so. So does that apply to that, or is it something totally different?
Yeah, so that is kind of in effect, and I think meeting for these purposes will be defined as a public meeting. So these are public decision-making meetings of the council. So it is clarifying that even if you're not a member of that body, you can attend. And within the rules, we are extending again the chairman's discretion to enable non-members to speak at meetings. So it happens already at OSMC. I don't know whether, I think it has happened at health scrutiny. So I think it's just saying, actually, you are a member of this authority. If you have interest in an item that's being discussed, determined in a body, then it will be for the chairman will have the discretion to enable you to make a comment or a point to that meeting if the chairman considers that that's appropriate.
But that also is determined, for instance, in planning, that there are strict rules, there are further rules on that, quite rightly.
And with licensing, licensing again, there's a statutory framework. So this will impact on the chairman's decision making as to whether to exercise their discretion to enable non-members to speak. So I think it's about having the discretion there. That doesn't mean they should do that on every occasion.
Okay. And then my last question, Chairman, is on page 27, and that's to deal with the executive. So I've seen here that that the leader should hold office. It's not me, anyway. Somebody's that should hold office when they resign from office. So when they have a deputy leader, if a leader ceases to be leader, that the deputy leader would obviously cease to be the deputy leader. Does that extend to the executive as well?
No, I don't believe. I think it will be for the leader to appoint their new executive. So if the leader ceased to be leader, then you would have to have a new leader appointed who may then change the executive.
But if there is a leader, for instance, who resigns for whatever reason, and then the deputy leader is obviously no longer leader, what you're saying is that the current executive would carry on until the new leader is appointed.
Yes, I think you would, because you couldn't have the administration of the authority. It's sort of set up with an executive form of governance. So you will need to have people who can make those decisions. So I think the deputy leader, that position will cease with the leader if the leader went for any reason. Although, yeah, I think.
I mean, who would cover for the leader between a resignation? Would we need to work that out?
I think, yeah, we would need to have, and I will look again. I'm sure that the statutory provisions, so all of this, I think, largely follows the legislative framework. So I've spent a lot of time in the 2000 Local Government Act and in the 1972 Act. So I would imagine that the process will be sort of stipulated in effect in the legislation, because local authorities will need to be able to continue to operate in the absence of a leader who has resigned for any reason. So it will be in there, the process.
But I would expect that in the gap, it would normally be senior officers who would have to take responsibility on that.
Well,
I'm talking about from the head of paid service downwards.
Well, so the head of
I mean, it may only be a short 1 week or so.
I think, you might need to call an emergency council. So because council appoints the leader. But I think, yes, the council would continue to operate, and that would include executive decision making. And the chief executive does have powers to take any decision in an emergency. So if there was something that needed to be taken, an executive decision, they could. But I think the rest of the executive would remain as members of the executive until otherwise.
And when if I can go further, when I looked at it, because I know Graham Jones mentioned it, we know that after an election, after the following Monday at 6 o'clock, and all the members cease to office, the chairman keeps office because that's part of the statute. And the vice chairman goes, but it's the leader of council would stay in office until a new leader is appointed by the new annual council, the inaugural annual council meeting, which is January and late May.
Yeah. So
is that on law or?
Yeah. So that's the 2000 Act. So the 1972 Act states that the chairman and vice chairman continue to hold office, and so the vice chairman stays there in the event that the chairman cannot act for any reason, and the same provisions sit there, and so that the chairman has a casting vote in the event of a tie. So even if they've no longer a member of the authority after the election because they've decided perhaps not to stand again, then they remain as chairman until the new chairman is appointed, and then they will hand over the reins to the new chairman and they will cease to be a member. And for the leader of council under the executive form of governance in the 2000 Act, you've got similar provisions for the leader. So the leader of the executive remains the leader of the executive until a new leader is appointed, and that will happen at the annual meeting.
That's assuming if it's there is a majority party, but if there isn't, then it could be difficult, like coalitions like you have in other European countries, for instance.
Well,
I'm sorry to be tautologist, but I just thought I'd mention
it. I can't comment on whether it would be difficult. It is a fact that the leader of council and the chairman of council hold their positions as members until they are replaced at the annual meeting. So regardless of whether they remain, whether they were elected, whether they stood, that they remain, they hold those positions.
So theoretically, a leader could be still carrying on leader after annual council, basically.
Well, I think that's why the provision is there, so that you have a leader in place who can continue to take those decisions till a new leader is elected.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, do you guys pick that up? So just pick that up. I shared Tony's slight confusion about the gap that appears after 224 on page 27. In that, is there scope for, I mean, to save any further confusion in succeeding years, where other members look at this and think, yeah, what if the leader gets run over by a bus? Mm-hmm. What happens next? Would it be either desirable, attractive, or possible at this point in time to insert a simple 225, which says in the absence of a leader for any reason, the chief executive, what you just explained, would something to explain who holds the forks. I get your point.
I think it's slightly, because I don't think that should have in effect the provisions that exist under the scheme of delegation, because this here is about the post, the leader of council, that position, which is a statutory position. It is a member position. So one of the members must be elected as the leader.
So what happens if there's an interregnum of, if there's a council or something, there's a long interregnum, lots of argy-bargy between groups, who's going to be the leader? The groups have to meet all that stuff.
Yeah, we have to have the annual council meeting, I believe, within 21 days of the election. So either way, that will have to, and by a series of votes, it's a legal requirement that we determine those things at that meeting. Now, I think the politics of hung councils or whatever, in effect, will play out.
I'm trying to make myself very clear. I suppose what I'm thinking is to make it very simple. The leader of this council disappears tomorrow, drops dead.
Yeah.
And we all sit there thinking, who's actually performing the leader's function between that moment and the time the group gets together and it says who's going to be the new leader? Then we all vote, put our bits of paper in, all that stuff. Who holds that function?
So what happened, and we've unfortunately had an example of that when we lost one of our leaders, Roger Croft, passed away, and actually, so the deputy leader stood up, in effect, in reality, and then that was agreed then formally by council. So in effect, they remained as executive members and operated. So the executive remained in place.
Right, yeah, of course.
And then we had the council meeting where the arrangements were formalised.
I suppose maybe I've just been dim. But when it goes on to say the leader shall appoint a deputy leader who shall cease to be deputy leader if the leader ceases to be leader.
Yeah.
So
and
you've lost your leader and your deputy leader.
Yeah.
Until sometime as we.
And I think that so that formal title went, but I think in terms of how you interact with the executive, that then in effect that they de facto stood in that role until that was officially confirmed.
Do we need to be explicit about that? That's all I'm saying.
Well, this is following. Well, I think this is following the legislative framework, and what I don't want to do is.
No, I'll take your advice. I just think
something
I can see where Teddy's coming from here.
And I think that what I would say, there are provisions in the 1972 Act that aren't replicated in the 2000 Act that I think were potentially omissions in that drafting. But we are working with what we have, and we can't go beyond that. And I think that's the care that we need to have. If somebody ceased to be a leader, we can call it a special meeting of council within 7 days. So there is, I don't know what's going to happen in that period that we couldn't deal with.
We've got to sort, the members have got to sort it out.
No, indeed,
special meeting. Yeah,
indeed.
I get that.
But even that, you've got that period of kind of organising that. So I think, so I think that's,
okay.
You can do that quite quickly if you need to.
You put up a sterling defence of a rather weak part of the 72 Act. Well done.
I think
Tony, I think you're right to identify that. It's a very important point. I think it is a bit confusing, but I think Sarah's explained to us that the statutory rules would.
Yeah, we have to abide by the law.
The statute rules. Yeah, I get that. It's well raised. Councillor Loco.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm probably just maybe running over old ground, but it's still a bit not clear in my head, especially when I look at 3.1.1 and 3.2.2, which 3.2.2 says that the deputy leader can act in the leader's place if the office of the leader is vacant. And then you have 3.1.1 that says that when the leader goes, the deputy resigns, then the deputy leader also resigns. So aren't those two contradicting themselves?
I will take this away to have a look at. I think, and it is one of those, as I say,
grey areas.
The legislation, it perhaps isn't as perfectly drafted as it could have been, but I will undertake to have a look at this before we issue the papers on Wednesday to see if it can be clarified, then to endeavour to do so.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's well raised, Tony. Was that it for you, Tony? And is that it for you as well, Councillor Logan? Thank you. Of course.
Actually, 2000, I was actually chairman, and I stepped down as councillor.
Right.
When the full council came, I was chair. It's actually quite surreal. Actually,
like you weren't actually chair, but you chaired it. Okay. No, okay. So we find it. We muddle through. It's the British way, isn't it? We muddle through. Yeah, we do. Do what we have to do. Okay. Any other observations on this draft? What we have to do here is have a proposer and second for this to be carried forward to full council for full council's approval. So
proposed, Jen.
Thank you, Councillor Linden. Thank you, Councillor.
Seconded.
Seconded, Councillor Moore. And can we have a vote in favour or against? And against? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much. We've got that. Unless there's any other business, I think we've concluded our work, and that's been a thorough job looking through those. Thank you, Tony, for doing that, and the rest for contributing. Thank you very much, and see you next time.